The house on Willow Creek Lane was the only home Maya had ever really known. To anyone looking in from the outside, it was a picture of perfect success. The lawn was a flawless emerald green carpet, and the white colonial-style house stood tall and proud, its black shutters a stark, elegant contrast. 2 expensive cars were always parked in the curved driveway. Inside, everything was spotless and orderly, from the plush beige sofas to the gleaming granite countertops in the kitchen. Photographs in silver frames chronicled a life of privilege. A young Maya learning to ski in Aspen, the family posing in front of the Eiffel Tower, all of them smiling on a sailboat under a bright sun. David and Elizabeth Carlyle had presented her adoption as their greatest act of generosity. They spoke of a struggling orphanage, of a little girl they had rescued from an uncertain future. They dressed her in the finest clothes, enrolled her in the best schools, and ensured she had every material advantage. Maya was polite, got good grades, and played the piano beautifully. She was the perfect addition to their perfect life. Yet, a quiet loneliness had always lived inside her, a feeling of being slightly out of place. Their hugs were brief, more like a formal greeting than a warm embrace. Her straight-A report cards were met with a nod and a simple, "We expect nothing less." When she once asked about her biological parents, her mother had smoothly changed the subject, talking about the upcoming charity gala instead. Maya felt like a beautiful painting hanging on their wall, admired by guests, a testament to their taste and kindness, but never truly touched or understood. She learned to push down the unease, to accept the polished reality they offered. She was the Carlyle's daughter, and that was supposed to be enough. She lived in a beautiful bubble, unaware that it was moments away from popping, that the foundation of her world was built on a secret that would change everything she thought she knew about family, love, and her own worth. The car glided into the familiar driveway, its tires crunching on the pristine gravel. The house stood as it always did, a monument to quiet wealth and order, every shutter perfectly aligned, every shrub sculpted into submission. Maya had come home early from her study group, the library having closed for a special cleaning. She pushed the heavy oak door open, expecting to be greeted by the usual silence of a weekday evening. Instead she heard them. Their voices, usually so measured and calm, were sharp and clear, carrying from the slightly ajar door of the home office upstairs. It was the tone that stopped her, a cold, practical efficiency she had never heard directed at her, but had always sensed lurking beneath the surface of their interactions. She stood frozen in the grand foyer, her book bag still slung over one shoulder, not breathing. Her mother's voice cut through the stillness first. "The monthly stipend is barely covering the new tuition increase. We need to file for that adjustment, the one for specialized academic needs." The caseworker mentioned it was a possibility if we could show a trajectory for advanced placement. There was a pause, the sound of a pen tapping on a hard surface. "We can use the piano lessons and the debate club as evidence of fostering exceptional talent. It should justify at least another $500 a month." Then her father's voice, a low rumble of agreement. "It's the only way it makes sense. The clothes, the car insurance, the trips, it all adds up. We have to maximize the return." He let out a short, dry sigh that held no warmth, only the weight of a calculation. "Let's be honest, David. She's nothing but our source of finance. A significant one, but still. Once she turns 18, the major subsidies end and we'll have to reassess. We can still leverage her college grants, though, if she stays in-state. There are additional funds for adoptive families there." The words did not feel like words. They felt like a physical blow, a shove that knocked the air from her lungs and the very foundation from under her feet. Source of finance. The phrase echoed in the hollow space inside her chest, each syllable a hammer strike shattering the beautiful gilded picture of her life. The ski trips to Aspen, the summer tours of Europe, the designer dress for the winter formal, it all crumbled into dust, revealing the ugly machinery beneath. It wasn't generosity. It wasn't love. It was a business transaction. She was the asset, the investment. The hugs that felt stiff, the praise that felt rehearsed, the way her A+ papers were met with a nod while Brandon's B+ in calculus earned a celebratory dinner, it all made a terrible, cruel sense now. She was not their daughter. She was their enterprise. She must have made a sound, a small, involuntary gasp, because the voices in the office suddenly stopped. Maya turned, her movements clumsy and uncoordinated, and fled back out the front door, not caring if it slammed behind her. She walked, without direction, her vision blurred by a hot, stinging pressure behind her eyes. The large, imposing houses of her neighborhood seemed to stare down at her, their windows like judgmental eyes. She was a fraud in her own life, an actor who had just read the real script and discovered her role was not the beloved heroine, but a prop, a convenient financial instrument. The weight of their deception was a physical burden on her shoulders. Every memory was now tainted, every kindness reinterpreted as a strategic move. The world, which had always felt slightly off-kilter, had finally tilted entirely off its axis, and she was left falling through a void of betrayal, the words source of finance, the only thing echoing in the emptiness. The world had not ended, but it had fundamentally and irrevocably changed. The colors were all wrong. The vibrant green of the lawn looked sickly, the cheerful yellow of the kitchen walls felt like a taunt. Maya moved through the house like a ghost, her body present but her spirit far away, nursing a wound no one else could see. The heavy oak door she had fled through was now a barrier she had to cross each day, separating the outside world where she had to pretend from the inside world where the truth festered. Her smile became a carefully crafted tool, pulled from a drawer each morning and fastened into place. It felt stiff and unnatural on her face, a mask she wore for survival. She observed her adoptive parents with a new, clinical detachment. She saw the way her mother's eyes would quickly scan her new genes, not with a mother's pride, but with an accountant's assessment of their cost. She noticed how her father would steer conversations about her future away from out-of-state colleges or gap years, gently guiding her toward the local university where, she now knew, the financial incentives for them were greater. Every mention of her black friends was met with a subtle, almost imperceptible tightening around her mother's mouth, a silent disapproval she had previously mistaken for simple concern. Now she understood it was about image, about the risk of her associating with a world that did not fit their pristine narrative. The lavish meals felt like sawdust in her mouth. The gifts, once a source of excitement, now felt like payments, a way to keep the asset compliant. She accepted them with a quiet thank you, the words tasting like ash. She stopped initiating hugs and they did not seem to notice. The physical distance between them grew, a chasm filled with the unspoken words she had overheard. She spent more and more time in her room, but it was no longer a sanctuary. The posters on the wall, the trinkets on the shelves, all felt like part of the set for a play in which she was the unwilling star. Her real life began in the hushed silence of the public library after school. While her parents believed she was diligently doing homework, she was secretly navigating a different kind of education. She typed emancipation laws for minors and age of majority in Connecticut into the library computers, her heart pounding as she read the results. She researched scholarships for adopted youth, for students of color, for first-generation college students, anything that could give her a financial lifeline they could not control. It was there, in the glow of the screen, that she found a name, Eleanor Evans, the social worker who had signed her final adoption papers. With trembling fingers, she composed an email, pouring out a carefully worded half-truth of a story about seeking her medical history and biological roots. She hit send, feeling a terrifying mix of terror and hope, a single desperate act of rebellion against the gilded cage she now saw so clearly. The kindness she had received was a loan, and she was now determined to pay it back with her silence, her patience, and ultimately, her freedom. The reply from Ms. Evans came not as an email, but as a phone call to the library's public phone, a discreet arrangement Maya had suggested. The woman's voice was not the bureaucratic drone Maya had feared, but warm, layered with a gentle rasp of age and experience. She remembered Maya not just as a case file, but as the quiet little girl with big, observant eyes. She agreed to help, but cautioned that the process of accessing sealed records was slow and often yielded little. They began a secret correspondence, a thread of truth running through the tapestry of lies Maya lived in. Miss Evans became a ghost in Maya's life, a voice of guidance in the library's silence, a beacon pointing toward a past Maya had never known. Weeks turned into a tense month of waiting. Then, a thick manila envelope arrived at a P.O. box Maya had rented with money from a secret part-time job her parents knew nothing about. Her hands shook as she tore it open. The documents inside were a revelation. She was not from a faceless, distant orphanage as the Carlyles had always claimed. She was from Baltimore. Her biological mother's name was Lena Johnson. She was 22 years old when Maya was born, a freelance graphic artist. There was a single grainy photocopied picture of a young woman with a bright, gap-toothed smile and the same curious eyes Maya saw in the mirror. She had died in a car accident when Maya was 3, a sudden, tragic event that triggered the cascade into the foster system. But the most shocking detail was buried in the final pages of the report. A small life insurance policy, taken out by Lena's own mother before she passed. It was a modest sum, but it had been designated explicitly for Maya's care and education, to be held in trust until she turned 18. The Carlyles had been named the trustees and administrators of that fund. The pieces of the horrible puzzle slammed into place with a force that left her dizzy. It wasn't just the state subsidies. It wasn't just the monthly stipends for her care. They had been using her own money, the last gift from a mother she would never know, to fund the very life they presented as their own generous charity. The European vacations, the piano lessons, the luxury car they said was for her safety. It had all been purchased, at least in part, with Lena's final sacrifice. The betrayal was no longer just emotional, it was financial, a theft of her inheritance and her history. The Carlyles hadn't just taken her in, they had erased her past and monetized her future, building their comfortable life on the twin pillars of state aid and a dead woman's love. The morning of her 18th birthday was quiet and unremarkable. There were no balloons, no wrapped gifts waiting at the breakfast table. The Carlyles had offered a brunch over the weekend, a performative celebration for a few close friends, but today was a Tuesday, a day for business. Maya had already packed her life into 2 suitcases and a backpack, all stored in the trunk of a used sedan she had purchased with a small student loan the week before. She came downstairs dressed not for a party but for a departure. She placed a single envelope on the kitchen island, her name written on the front in her neat handwriting. Inside was not a heartfelt letter, but a printed document from a lawyer, facilitated by Ms. Evans, formally severing all legal and financial ties with David and Elizabeth Carlyle, and a list of every withdrawal they had made from her inheritance trust that was not for direct educational or essential living expenses. When her parents came down, their expressions were not of sadness, but of stunned confusion, quickly hardening into a defensive silence as they read the documents. There were no tears, no pleas for her to stay. There was only the cold, stark reality of being caught. Maya did not look back as she walked out the door. The sound of it closing behind her was not a slam, but a quiet, final click, the sound of a lock turning on a chapter of her life that was now over. She drove south, the Connecticut mansions giving way to the urban landscape of Baltimore. Her new home was a small studio apartment above a bakery, its walls thin but its lease entirely in her name. She enrolled in the community college, using the reclaimed remnants of her inheritance to pay for her first semester. She found the street where her mother had lived, a row of brightly painted townhouses. She didn't knock on any doors, she just sat on a bench across the street, feeling a connection that had been stolen from her for 15 years. A neighbor, an older woman who remembered Lena, saw her sitting there and approached. This led to an introduction to cousins she never knew she had, a loud, sprawling family who welcomed her with a messy, imperfect, but utterly genuine love. Maya started a YouTube channel from her tiny apartment, the sounds of the city a constant backdrop. She didn't speak of the Carlyles by name, but she told her story, the story of a girl who was made to feel like a transaction, a financial instrument. She spoke about the importance of knowing your roots, of the hidden struggles within the foster and adoption system, and of the incredible strength it takes to reclaim your own narrative. Her channel grew not into a viral sensation but into a quiet community of survivors. She was no longer a source of finance for anyone. She was the architect of her own life, building a future on a foundation of hard-won truth, her own resilient strength, and the rediscovered, enduring echo of a mother's love that no one could ever take from her again.